performance goal associated with that, at least according to the draft that I have.
I think we were waiting until the end of this fiscal year 17 end
Wow.
to use.
See what's going on out there? No?
Yeah, the fire truck.
Yeah, paramedics. I came
Yeah,
out in the elevator.
I was just
Oh.
told that an employee in our finance department slipped and fell and hurt her knees when they came. But she's okay, hopefully.
I apologize for the big
Yeah.
interruption.
We're on action item 3C, looking at the PSTA evaluation system, and Brad has incorporated some of the suggestions from our board member discussion.
Thank you.
So I think the next thing you'll see this, the customer revenue hour will have a goal of whatever we achieve in fiscal year 17, that'll be our goal to increase that in 18.
The problem is, we can't really control directly, customers, number per hour or anything else. We're doing everything we can to try and get more riders, but if ridership is down nationally, there's not a lot that we can do immediately to correct that. So I want to make sure that we're being fair in how we rate Brad and anybody else that would have this same sort of scorecard, because there's no direct thing that we can do to make ridership increase. It's decreasing nationwide.
I tend to agree, and that's why at the board discussion last week, I said, we should measure things we can control, like the lead indicators, but holding us responsible for a lag indicator, like ridership, could be penalizing the CEO for gas prices or a hurricane that shuts down our system for several days, or the economy.
Yeah. Right. So I think probably a better way to reflect it might be trying to tie it, compared to the national trends or in some relative scale that tries to better not necessarily only reflect what we can totally control, because as you can see on there, there's lots of things. These are supposed, and there should be, for the organization, these are supposed to be outcomes, outcome goals. Like, for example, the percent of employees who found training to be effective. All the employees, no matter how awesome the training that we provide next year, they could just decide that we're going to stick it to Brad and say it was not effective, and they did not learn anything except for how to fill out the evaluation form in a very bad way. They could do that. Hopefully they won't. But they're all like that. They're not supposed to be that any of these are really supposed to be outputs. What we do doesn't necessarily matter. If the customers don't like it or the employees don't learn from it, it doesn't matter what we do. But on ridership, again, it's a little bit different than that. Just the aggregate amount of ridership. If we cut half the routes or we have hurricanes, I do think it does need to be in some kind of relative to the national trend, and
We can run clean buses, we can run buses on time. Those are things in our control, and
Yeah.
those in some way contribute to our ridership numbers of what we can control. Commissioner Johnson?
It seems to me that there is some part of that that's proactive, that you're trying to tune routes, get better service on routes where we can perform better, and so that we attract more ridership. Like you were telling me about, the ridership on the weekends is increasing, and But now maybe the ridership on the weekends is, even though it's increasing on the weekends, the cost of getting that ridership is going to result in customers per revenue hour lower on the weekends than what it is during the week. It's the effectiveness of, are we reaching as many customers as we can in adjusting our routes and our hours of service to match their desired and their ability to utilize it. So I see that's more what I look at that customers per revenue hour than the adjusted to gas prices type of thing. And maybe there's two sides of that you adjust it to national trends, but you also are being how do you measure how creative you are in changing the direction in a way that makes sense?
Well, I'm sure we can come up with a metric for that. It's just it's something that we struggle with as an organization.
And I
There's
think
two ways to increase ridership. Make the fares free,
Right.
and we have shown that lowering the fare increases ridership. We did that in the month of June, and we saw 10 times as many people buy the bus pass at $35 than they do at $70. So we could do that, although we'd run out of money. We could eliminate the lowest performing routes in our system and take that money and those buses and put them on the highest ridership routes. But when presented with that recommendation, the PSTA board has, with a room full of citizens that were upset, chosen not to do that. So
We fold like a lawn chair.
But we have a social obligation. So,
Yes.
But
We do.
at that time, we didn't have the alternative that we do now.
So what alternative do we have?
The Uber or
the first mile and last mile is hopefully going to make things different next go around. But
And I think the customer satisfaction in both areas, it says a lot about whether you're being innovative, whether you're meeting people's needs. They don't have any problem telling us when we're not making them happy.
yeah. Yeah, I think at this point, in order to get going on this, we'll probably not include in the scorecard a direct ridership item. I am working on a presentation to the committees and maybe to the full board this month on ridership, on a more detailed analysis of what's happening to ridership, what's causing it to go down, or I don't know, that might be too bold. Where it's going down, or what routes are going down, what routes are going up, what routes are not decreasing, or parts of our ridership that are not going down, like transportation disadvantaged, they're just going up. So the board understands it a little better, at least.
Commissioner Long?
Yeah, I was just curious, Brad, because you sit on several national groups, associations, et cetera. Maybe you've answered this already and I just haven't gotten here yet, but is there a trend that they're noticing nationwide of why the ridership levels are going down?
There are some studies that are underway now, some scientific studies to try to confirm or quantify reasons for the national decrease in transit ridership. There's been a lot of expert sort of statements that gas prices, the improved economy, more mobility options of Uber and Lyft in some markets are having an effect. It's pretty obvious that bus-only systems are having a greater decline than rail systems. And that may be caused because the rail systems have generated in the cities that have rail, the whole development of their city has grown around the rail. So the people that are living there and are using the rail, they maybe don't have cars, so they need it. But in cities, especially mid-sized cities, not the largest cities, but in cities of our size, the ridership, the national trend is down even more than we are down. We benefit from having the tourist economy, and our tourist ridership is not really down. It's flat, and except for the Clearwater Marine Aquarium, might even be up a little bit. And so our ridership decline is not as severe as some other cities that don't have the tourist market sort of holding us, doing a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, it's the talk of the whole industry as far as where things are going, what the trend is. You know, gas prices went up a little bit over the summer. They're back down again now, but they went up a little bit, and the ridership trends started going up a little bit too. So,
Brad, to kind of tag on to Commissioner Long's question in terms of what other agencies are doing, suppose in the future where we would be in a position of looking for a new CEO, could we potentially scare someone away because we'd have ridership numbers included as part of the evaluation? Would that be something that would be seen as a little unfair or unusual?
I certainly think it would be unusual.
Okay.
If you recall, a year ago when we had our little workshop that kicked off this scorecard process, Mark Ash from Transpro presented, and he presented specifically a whole case of why ridership should not be on the scorecard. And he described that, I guess, some of his clients that he had worked on, the board members did say, well, ridership is the only thing that needs to be on the scorecard. And then he advised the CEO just to eliminate the fare. And then you'll have a great evaluation, because ridership will go through the roof. But it's important to have that maybe affects your financial position if you don't have a fare. You might have more riders. And this is supposed to be more of a balance. So whether or not, tracking ridership is certainly not, is what every transit system, of course, does. But this is supposed to be more of a balanced, holistic look at everything.
So to segue to balanced and holistic, could we move to the sustainability part? Because I recall Commissioner Eggers had suggested that being included, and I see at the top here, the third box down under community support is environmental sustainability. And it occurred to me that, when we talk about sustainability, we've been talking about environmental, but also social and financial as well. So, should we, I don't want to wordsmith this, but should it be maybe something like sustainability, environmental, social, environmental, social, financial, and try to get all of it? Or, I don't know, do you want to address?
Well,
It looks like we're tying it into APTA sustainability indicators too?
Yeah. Yes. We speak of our sustainability as environmental, financial, and social. And I know, as we all know, Commissioner Eggers has focused many times, made many statements about not seeing where we're addressing all three of those with some of our decisions on buses and things like that. we have a whole strategic goal called financial stability that looks at our financial sustainability.
Oh, yeah.
We have customer satisfaction, which in large sense is essentially social, I think, like Commissioner Jordan was just saying. That kind of speaks to whether we're meeting our social obligation to the riders, as if they're satisfied in some sense. What we didn't have on here without a specific environmental sustainability is the actual environmental sustainability. We didn't have that. And so we added this mostly to focus on the environmental piece, which is a component, obviously 1/3 of it. But then, at least we selected the APTA sustainability indicators as our metric because those do also, the APTA program is entirely based on those 3 prongs. Environmental, financial, and social. So there are, of the 11 initiatives, a couple of those are financial and social.
Okay.
Those are, you may be familiar with other sustainability or programs where you advance from bronze to silver to gold to maybe platinum. And we got to bronze last year. And so to get to silver, we have to advance on a certain number. I can't remember if it's the 6 or 11. I think it's the 6. This essentially allows us to advance to the silver level of sustainability. And of the 11, not all of them are pure, green environmental. Some of them are financial or social.
Sorry.
So I think we're covered.
Well, because I have short-term memory or long-term memory loss, looking at the performance metrics goals, the 11 are listed, but for instance, unlinked passenger trips is more good and less bad. Vehicle miles traveled is more vehicle miles traveled good versus reducing miles negative. It's the
You're looking in the definition sheet?
yeah, and
Where is that?
it was attached as a, wasn't it part of the, maybe it was part of the board package.
Yeah, well, in your Granicus, it's in the July board meeting packet.
I think it was in the September board package too.
I will find that out. I'll find,
Yes. It was in September of last month's board packet.
Or was it in Granicus or is? it's on
September
the
what
website.
meeting?
The board meeting, the September 27th board
Yeah, okay.
meeting.
it was not in there.
I just opened it up, I swear to God.
The metric parameters and goals from 6/22/17.
Yes. This, right, this chart thingy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Okay, it's there too. Okay. Sorry. I will confirm whether I'm certain that unlinked passenger trips would go up. That would be a good thing. Because that would increase financial revenue theoretically, because more fares and reduce emissions from.
Providing more service to our customers, which is a social benefit.
Yeah.
So I personally think we should just leave it like this for a year and try it out.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that Commissioner Eggers had an issue with was being able to make written comments of his own. And I didn't really notice if there was a way to do that. I know this comes
There
aggregated
is.
over here,
Yeah.
so he wants to be able to say terrible things about him.
I know.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Or wonderful things about you, in
Yeah.
addition to what's on there.
But not just as a, he said, not just as a written comment, but publicly. We wanted it to.
Uh,
Public.
That opportunity is always available.
It is.
Could that be as part of the evaluation, just the
Well, just like
the
it is.
open-ended,
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
that you want to add, narrative?
Yeah, and I.
So, yeah,
public
and it'll
record.
go on public record anyway if he wants to.
Okay. So Brad, you're looking for a recommendation from the executive committee? to-
Yes.
So, may I just
Yes,
ask?
yes.
So before we do a recommendation, along with this scorecard, Brad, are you going to do your overview like you have in the past that gives the goals that we set and what we've accomplished? And
Yes, exactly.
I find that so helpful because there's so much that goes on in a year
Right.
that it's easy to lose sight of some of our big,
Yeah.
success stories.
As a reminder, this recommended format will not actually be implemented, or the board members will not have to fill out this form, this new and improved form, until a year from now. The next evaluation that the board members do of me will be exactly like it has been, or recommended to be exactly like it has been, where I'll provide that basically self-assessment, or the goals that were laid out, proposed for fiscal year 17, and then what happened on each of them and the accomplishments. And then even under this new format, I will do the same thing.
I think it's important.
Mhm.
Commissioner Murphy?
On the commitment to performance box, improvement of at least half of the metrics currently below median. How many of the metrics are we below median? I thought we were doing pretty well.
We are doing pretty well. I think there was 6 or 7. Yeah, so the benchmarking, as I presented before, collects hundreds of different key performance indicators, and there's some that if you're great at one thing, you are going to be below average on the other thing.
Mhm.
Like if you don't run any buses, you will have lower cost, but you'll have lower ridership too. And so the full list tries to, you're going to have some that are below the median, no matter what. This goal says that PSTA focuses on the areas that were below the median with our budget and our staff resources and everything, and then we see improvement just within ourselves, not necessarily comparing us so much to the other organizations, just that we improved from what we did the year before on that area. It's kind of like golf, where you're just kind of like trying to get better yourself or something. That's really what we're trying to measure here. And my idea about including this was this, we want to be a data-driven organization. We want to make decisions based on the data and on, I think, by focusing on the areas that we are below the median on and trying to see improvement in those, that's a good KPI. I think we'll see if it works out as I think it will, but that's a good way of measuring whether the PSTA is focused on the areas it should be focused on, areas where we want to improve on based on where the data shows that we're, trending a little below average. Rather than just improve on the things that we already are awesome at and we can do with no problem.
Mr. Joseph?
While you've been having this interesting conversation, I've been looking at the documents that were online, and I sense that there's a document inconsistency between what was presented. This is consistent throughout all of them, but then there was one document that has the values ratings on the bottom of it. But in the top, there are two categories, success goals and scorecard results. And I'm a little confused as to how I don't see the thread going through everything.
What's the other document that you're looking at? Is it going back to our?
It was in there.
I don't know. Are you looking at last week's board meeting?
Yeah.
In the
No, not
PowerPoint?
that one.
Oh.
Transport, no, try the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, in that one.
Okay. We are in the board performance evaluation guide. And there's some
what was the date on
thumbnail
Is that the-
images as part of the
Yeah, that's it.
document.
Hold on, Darden, we're trying to figure out where he's, are you in?
Board meeting.
There you go. Whoops, I hit the wrong button.
Oh, it's here.
That was the fourth.
Okay.
It's this thing.
Oh,
Yeah, because what's this top category? Or maybe this was an older version.
so is this for us as a board to evaluate our own behaviors? That's-
No. This is the draft performance evaluation summary of format that Transpro has recommended for us to adopt.
Right, but who is the "we" in "we are trustworthy, we invite robust debate, we take personal responsibility, we innovate and drive"? Who
Well,
is the "we"?
In the values.
That would be me, Brad. The board members are going to fill out a questionnaire where the board members evaluate my adherence to the PSTA value system.
So the "we" is PSTA as a whole, as individuals and as a whole.
As an agency.
Yeah. So that's why we.
Yeah.
Our values
The
is that
board and
we.
the CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your evaluation is of me, and so
So this is only a part of the evaluation.
correct.
Let's squeeze that down. Where's this say? Agency outcomes, performance scorecards. Because in here, we have commitment to performance, which is this one, which is the ABVG, and we have the same thing up there.
Right.
What's the difference between those two groupings?
The format above needs a little bit more work.
All right, that's.
Yes, they have this, Transpro has this concept that the scorecard will be essentially half of the overall quantitative goal, and then we'll pick out 5 very specific goals to be the other half, like double counting them. And I have the same question I think you're driving at, is why would we do that? I really don't understand.
Okay.
And they haven't responded to my
So-
question on that, but
So Brad, another way of looking at this would be, okay, so you should receive 15 scorecards, but the performance evaluation page will be one page that shows the cumulative ratings from all the scorecards that board members fill out. Is that,
The board members will not fill out anything related to this top half of the evaluation. 50 points.
right, okay.
Every single
Based on
quarter.
data.
Every quarter,
Mhm.
I will present to you a performance scorecard.
Got it.
And I will know personally how many points out of 50 I'm going to get on that part of the thing.
Mhm.
Based on us achieving the results, we'll decide whether or not I get a 50 out of 50 or a 46 or
Okay,
whatever.
I'm sorry, yes. But we do fill out the values assessment.
Right. Then I will present to you a list of accomplishments and the goals set out for me and over the last year, just like I have been. And you will fill out a questionnaire related to the values, and it will have open boxes, so board members can write what they want as well. Just on sort of this component, which will be subjective, obviously, and there will be 15 different board members filling that out. So we'll take the averages
Got it.
of those and add them to the one fixed number up above to equal 100 points, to equal whatever out of 100. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, it's a nice glimpse of objective measurements and then subjective, and a good overall assessment about how we're doing with key metrics. And from that score, we'll have a prescription of where we need to focus to keep doing what we're doing well and where we need to focus on bringing our numbers up.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I like about this, I like that we have a lot more of the data and the objective numbers included in this. And I think with any HR challenge anywhere you go is what's called the halo effect, or I forget what the other term is for the opposite of halo. I don't think it's horns, but anyway, it's it helps balance out the recency of whether a CEO made a mistake or whether they just dazzled you with something. This helps give a more even evaluation of how we've been performing for the whole year. That's consistent, yeah, and less subject to subjectivity.
My only concern is that the things that we're measuring are in fact things that we can control, or in this case Brad can control. That's so that we have not only an accurate evaluation, but also a truly fair evaluation. That you're not asking for a performance in an area where there's no control. In this case by the CEO, but it could be by any person in the executive branch, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's sort of the scary part of it that what I've been trying to tell my employees is, and the organization is, this is it's just more fair. I mean, if PSTA has a bad year where, I can't imagine this exactly, but through no fault of my own, we go over budget, or we get, I don't know, we don't get any legislative support in some way, and we don't, all of our surveys go down and everything like that. I mean, that's not a good year for PSTA, and the CEO is responsible for that.
But you would get that picture flagged every quarter.
And we would see that every quarter.
So you would, and
No surprises.
And but in the end, the board might still say, well, but there were external factors, and the CEO did embody the values that we really want, and then that'd be a component of the evaluation as well.
But the actual salary increase is not directly tied to the score number. It's, I mean, there's,
Well, and that was the other thing that came up at the board meeting, that Transpro is certainly recommending that we establish, and we have a year to do this, but that we would establish maybe a more structured method of adjusting compensation based on based on this. Because you're right. Right now, just if the board just approves this, and then has a separate vote on the compensation based completely on subjectivity, then maybe this is not that useful.
I can't imagine that any future board would not make some link, but they might adjust that link based on economy and things that are outside of control.
Yeah. Hart has struggled with that, at least according to Catherine, that they adopted not this exact method, but kind of a similar metrics or goals, quantitative goals, a couple of years ago, but then the compensation adjustment discussion at the board, they sort of ignore it. Whether Hart had a really great year or a really not so great year, the compensation discussion is completely separate. And based on some recent performance of the Hart financial situation, maybe that's been a good thing for Catherine. But it's not necessarily, I don't think, the ideal. There should be a structure that, based on performance, is how the compensation is computed.
Well, I'm going to have to be leaving here in 15 minutes, and right now on the performance scorecard, I'm a little confused with the thing that we were looking at before, and I'd like to have that resolved in such a way that I can explain what's going on to somebody else, and right now I'm a little confused, so.
Any other comments by any other executive committee members? We can take a vote.
I'm happy to make a motion to recommend the evaluation scorecard that's been presented. And I think if we have additional questions or concerns, a great time to get those answered is when we have our one-on-one with you, which is what I plan to do.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll second
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
that. Aye.
Any opposed?
I just had my one-on-one with Brad, so I'm going to have to figure out how to do that.
So you're voting no?
I'm voting no.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving along to our information items, and if everyone would please take a look at our proposed October agenda. I'm trying to pull it right now.
It tells about your places, I believe.
Oh, yes, thank you. It's in front of us as well.
Is it not?
Oh, no,
No.
it's
No,
not.
Oh.
Okay.
No?
So it looks like we we'll be starting with a presentation from Ashley Handy on Safe Place.
Yes, there is a national organization called Safe Place, and PSTA will be soon to become designated as a safe place.
And thank you very much.
You are familiar with this?
That's, yes. Wait, it's part of my,
What?
October, Safe Place got postponed.
oh, did,
October's supposed to be a leadership PSTA graduation.
oh,
I'm sorry, no one told me.
Okay.
Okay, so that will be,
Do you have
Safe
somebody
place.
from Family Resources coming about safe place?
That was the plan.
Okay.
That was the plan.
Maybe
I don't know what's holding it exactly.
That's good.
And it is the group project that our first graduating class of leadership PSTA
Is that right?
6 superstars are launching. So it's like tomatoes. Well, I guess we'll have the leadership graduation as our kickoff, and then do the safe place in November.
Okay.
But yes, now you're seeing it correctly. I think this is a practical joke, but I enjoy the optimism of putting the Gillig bus purchase on the consent agenda. I can't imagine our finance committee is going to do that,
Yeah.
but keep hope alive.
Where is that?
Where do you?
What
I-
number?
The board agenda.
Page 2,
Yeah, what number is that?
6D.
Oh, you put it on action.
We're looking at the
You
wrong.
moved it to action.
oh, I'm looking at a,
No, it's still on consent.
okay.
It's, you know,
This is the wrong one.
This is the wrong one.
The one that I got
I mean, it
from
must
you
be
this
a-
morning
Oh, yeah.
has it as consent agenda.
right.
The
Yeah, I
one that
don't
was
see
on
that.
The one in the packet doesn't even have it.
Right.
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that was an addition that Debbie Leos told me that she wanted to put on there.
Okay.
Can you email that around after our meeting today?
Yeah.
An updated.
Do we have anything else?
Anything unusual with the Pinellas, forward Pinellas funding agreement? Is that pretty straightforward in terms of pass-through funding for PSDA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. The one issue that came up at the last meeting that, at the very end of the meeting, Ray Tremonti, Executive Director of T-BARDA, came to, up to Chair Pace and I, and said that it is customary for him to give an update to give a T-BARDA update to all of his member governments. And he asked if he could be put a item on our agenda to have a T-BARDA update.
Absolutely.
Which,
Yeah.
Before we go there,
Mhm.
can we just delay that for a month or so? Because we're in an interim status right now, and the new T-BARDA board is trying to figure out what we are gonna be and what our mission is and what we're gonna look like and all of that going forward. And we're also looking at the new skill sets and goals and objectives that we want for the new CEO, whoever that might be. It might be Ray, but it might not.
yeah. We could delay it, or, this idea was, this is not an action, this would be a report, kind of like Patty Johnson gives of the local, we would put it in the report section. And either as the PSTA representative on T-BARDA, you could give it, or a staff member could give it.
I'd like to have that conversation in our policy committee, is
Planning committee.
kind of like the new executive committee of the new T-BARDA board, before we act on it.
Okay.
But, Madam Chair,
Mhm.
would you not want some guidance from the PSTA board as you're trying to work through that?
I guess I'm not really sure what kind of guidance you think our board can give, considering the fact that our own T-BARDA board doesn't know what we're working on that right now.
Is Pinellas County and the city of St. Petersburg also members of T-BARDA? Do they get a
Yes.
report?
Commissioner Seal is the representative from the county commission, and the mayor is the representative from St. Pete.
And does Commissioner Seal give a brief update on,
Well, she just got on there, so there's only.
She just got on there, and she didn't make the first meeting. She was away.
Were you ever? Yeah.
Well, I thought Ray was saying that that it was customary for T-Bar to do an update on T-Bar activities to be presented to all the members. And I thought he was just saying, well, now we're a member, so we should get an update too.
I don't remember getting one before.
I'm
If
sorry,
we
I
need a
didn't hear
month
that.
for T-BARTA to have internal discussions so that they're presenting something more coherent to us to get started with, rather than us all
I
just
think
talking
there's
past each other,
I
that's
think
fine
there's
for
a
me.
very appropriate report that could be made at our board meeting about what we're doing and what, what our actions have been thus far, but I'm not sure that I think it should be done by Ray. So I'd like to run that by, we're gonna be meeting here very shortly, and we're gonna,
The planning,
it's called a policy committee. There's two committees that have been established. One is policy, and the other one is finance. And the whole focus is to bring recommendations to the full board on what our new mission and goals and objectives are, since we've been given very clear specifics from the legislature. So that's one piece. And the other piece is to define the skill sets, objectives, and measurement standards for the new CEO. Those are the first two things that we have to do. And I don't know how the PSTA entire board can, I don't know, somehow that doesn't quite sit well with
But you
me.
said it's just a report about what's going on there.
Yeah.
Not the conclusions, but just, here's the process
This
that's
is what we're
going
working
on.
on.
Would you be able to give that rather than
Well, yes, after we have our next
Ray?
meeting, I will.
Yeah, but that'll be
Yeah.
before our next.
It should be. In fact, it might have already been put on there, and I just don't know it.
I mean, my,
Okay, so I'm sensing we're going to defer on a report from Ray Tremonti, and the report that we do get will come from our T-BARTA representative, Commissioner Long.
Yeah,
at-
either
at a
that or our
date
new
to
chair,
be-
because we have a new chair, and
Mhm.
that could be a good option as well.
Okay.
The action item will be the evaluation system, so our committee will be making a recommendation, and in between today and that day, presumably
Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson will have a one-on-one meeting to further clarify things, where you can make your questions and issues known at our discussion for that meeting. Anything on the proposed February service changes?
Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
may, because now I'm confused.
Okay.
So maybe I need better clarification from this executive committee about what the group thinks the responsibilities of your T-BARTA representative should be on this policy board. I'm gathering from Counselor Johnson that he's in the mindset that any voting or decision-making from me on that board should be approved by the PSTA board. Is that what you're thinking, Bill? I know that's kind of how you operate with the council, right?
In Clearwater, our policy is that if something comes up, when I'm representing the city of Clearwater here at PSTA, I will exercise my judgment based on what I've heard. If there's something coming up in the future, at 2 months from now, I will go back to the council and give them an update. Here's an issue that's coming up. I'd like to get some guidance. And so that's my model. I'm not sure, PSTA has a rep as part of the T-BARTA board. And so I'm thinking that your position on the T-BARTA board would be stronger if you said, yeah, this is where our board has expressed an interest in going, not necessarily every single discussion.
So then that's not really proposing a change, because
Sure.
we're sending our chair as a representative, not as a delegate. So we're trusting our chair to provide color commentary on these issues as they arise on an as-needed basis.
So
Right.
as an example, in the first meeting of the Policy Council, there were several of us that felt very strongly that our very first big decision needed to be who is going to be our CEO going forward. And there were some members of the group that were okay with just letting Ray continue as he has been. There were other members of the group who were very adamant that we had a responsibility, because it's a brand-new agency, to clearly define what we want the new CEO to be doing in a big visionary way to lead this new agency forward. And so, you know, that's a policy decision that needs to be made, and for the best interest of the agency. And if you're not part of that discussion in the moment, I don't know how I come back to PSTA and say, all right, this is what we're working on, what do you think? Because I don't know that you're in the bowels of the work we're doing to the level where you'd be able to make that kind of a decision. Or even as to the strategies that we're working on moving forward. And to that point, we've floated the idea of having a workshop that it has a facilitator to help guide us through how do we get, you know, here. And the here is having a really good public transportation system that operates in a regional way. I mean, that's what we all keep talking about, right?
Commissioner Jordan?
Well, and I think you're right. If you're not sitting there and working on that board, you don't know how the executive director is functioning to carry out the goals of the board or whatever. So the people that are sitting there make those decisions. And like Bill said, you know, you're representing us there, and you know what the concerns and the goals of PSTA are. I trust you to carry those out.
Well, yeah, and
Just the way we do on every board we sit on, you know.
right, and we can't, it would be unreasonable to think that we could go back to our boards, or it's like you and I could go back to the county commission and discuss with all 7 of us decisions that need to be made on PSTA, because all 7 of us haven't been part of those discussions for.
But there may be, at some point, there may be something that this board is gonna, the PSTA board's gonna vote on, that we'd like to get some input from.
Yeah, well, and obviously,
You know.
since I sit on.
And we have
both-
enough time to
I
do.
mean, right, it's regional transportation, what surprises are there going to be?
Right.
I would think it's more in the policy kind of direction. Standing on the bow of the ship saying, we're gonna go this direction, and if PSTA says, I have a question about in relation to that,
Yeah.
I'm not so interested in the decision about your performance rating of whoever's there.
Yeah, if we know something big is gonna come up.
I just wanted to
then-
make sure that I was thinking the proper way about serving on this board, because it would not be in my character to go advocate something totally contrary to what we're doing on PSTA.
Right.
I've been one of the biggest advocates to move us forward.
And with big important votes, the HART delegate, the PSTA, all the delegates at that board will have a stronger testimony when they say, oh, and by the way, my board voted on this unanimous, or whatever. But you'll know what those votes are. You'll know when you need to do that
I'd like
ahead
to
of time.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so we can
I don't
keep
know,
on
I
talking.
just feel like we trust who we vote for to send as our representatives And if we didn't trust, you wouldn't be the representative.
Right.
So,
There you go. Do my best.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let me put that here. So any heads up on the proposed February service changes?
Well, yes, I'm hopeful. Don't know yet the outcome of that, but we will know the outcome before it's ultimately recommended. That we will present a picture of where ridership is and some changes that to have to move some resources from some of our lowest performing routes to higher performing routes as part of that presentation.
Okay.
How we might go through that.
Okay.
Are we doing anything to try to get an autonomous route? Like my car is doing in downtown? Why can't we do that too?
Say that again?
Councilmember Board Shores.
Sitting in the background, in a gallery here. Yes, we have been in contact with several manufacturers of autonomous vehicles to understand when the technology will be ready for a mixed-use environment that we have here. So we're looking at, we don't have any exclusive guideway right now, like what HART is doing on the Marion Street Transit Center, Transitway. So we need to operate in a different kind of environment. Technology is advancing to that point. So we've been, like I said, we've been in contact with several manufacturers to see how they're progressing in order to accommodate our environment.
Well, to that point, if I might, Madam Chair, at our last county commission meeting, we heard the presentation from our economic development officer on the Amazon opportunity. And that's poised to be a very regional, collaborative effort. And one of the things that's going to be a real ding to our region is the lack of regional transportation options. And I think that given that we can really move the bar on that collaborative effort with Amazon, would really help to put an extra oomph in doing something and doing it quite quickly. And, you know, I've talked to you about this before, Cassandra, that the state and the feds are antiquated in terms of how they provide funding, because it takes them so long, or it takes us so long as an applicant to get in the queue. And with the way that technology is changing, I'm fearful that we're not going to be able to keep up because our funding mechanisms are so antiquated. So if you can pass that message, because I certainly am going to be harping on it for a while.
Agreed, and I think what we're trying to do is get ahead of that, is say, if the technology, if the manufacturers are telling us that the technology will be ready for us to use in a year and a half or 2 years, then we ought to be applying now for a grant to be implemented when the technology is ready, as opposed to waiting for either one of those things to materialize.
So is there a way for us to create a partnership with some of those manufacturers, or a consortium of manufacturers to work in concert with our work at the federal and state levels on our advocacy?
Yes.
That was a big convoluted question, but did you understand what I was saying, Brad?
To call Harry and ask him if we could hook him up with some of the autonomous vehicle manufacturers and
Well, it
create a partnership?
just seems to me that if we could position ourselves to be a pilot, and the manufacturers knew that we were really serious and working really hard to get the funding,
Yes.
seems to me they'd be willing to help us push it along.
I'm sure they would, yeah.
Short answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be worthwhile.
In addition, I did agree to PSTA's planning staff, led by Cassandra, to participate with the City of St. Petersburg's Economic Development Division and the St. Pete Chamber in concert with the Tampa Chamber and Economic Development and HART on putting together the transportation proposal for the Amazon
Good.
pitch.
Good.
Excellent.
Great.
Congratulations to Cassandra.
And it could be a very big impetus for whatever the Rays decide to do.
Mhm.
That all worked.
Yeah, considering what I was told was that the proposed site, the Pinellas proposed site for Amazon would be the Trop site.
Mhm. Right.
So,
Potentially.
Potentially.
yeah.
Because Hillsborough really doesn't have room for them.
Nothing that big, no. Be way out of town.
Okay.
Okay.
I-
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Commissioner Barkley?
With regard to autonomous vehicles that Commissioner Long was talking about, I think another issue is that we need to consider our SEIU issues, because if we're talking about autonomous vehicles, we're talking about less drivers, or at least no new drivers, if we add them to our existing fleet. So we need to make sure that we've got a clear path to allow that to happen. We don't want to get into aggravating or in any way damaging the relationship that we currently have, which is a very good relationship with the unions.
Right. Exactly.
That's a
And
really
we've-
good point.
We've made an emphasis point to have constant communication with our union members on our Direct Connect and other, partnerships with Uber. And same thing with the discussions that we've had about autonomous vehicles, that
But-
we're looking to complement the public transit system with these new technologies so that overall ridership grows. And we're not replacing their jobs,
We're enhancing them.
we're enhancing them.
That's fine.
Because
I just-
the first iterations of them, my understanding is from what I've read, and we've had presentations at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, they're all gonna have I don't know what they're gonna call them, but there will be a human being at the wheel, ready and able to, override or take over, should it be necessary,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I don't think I made that up.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and there's a difference between automated vehicles and driverless
Yes,
cars.
there is.
Okay. I just want to make sure we don't, that could really slow things down dramatically if we had any kind of litigation or
Yeah.
problems. So we want to be able to move forward with a smooth program.
Anything else on the rest of our agenda? I'm looking forward to hearing the review of the late shift, the first year.
Yeah.
And I see now under 8C PSTA contracts, will that be the Gillig report, or Gillig would actually be an action item because we'd be voting on the contract, right?
That would be
Okay.
an
action item?
action item.
Okay.
The PSTA contracts is a quarterly regular report that we give to the board
Okay.
of listing all the contracts
Got it.
that we have. That theoretically, you're supposed to, as board members, read and memorize and just check to make sure that your company that you're affiliated with is not on the list presenting a conflict.
Got it.
Which I
Okay.
don't know of any, so we're okay.
Do you have dates for when you want us to travel again?
We have our legislative committee meeting on Wednesday. I hope you'll be there. And that is the number one item on the agenda, is to map out with our lobbyists the appropriate times in which we might travel to both Tallahassee and Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Any other questions about our October 2017 agenda? Seeing none, if there's any other business or questions, we can adjourn our executive committee meeting.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, great, thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Okay. Be sure to thank Boo for putting this here, because I jumped out of my chair and ran down here, and I didn't have my little device.
It is, as an FYI, on Thursday, City